All right, welcome in to another edition of Carps Corner. Pretty excited here. Finally, game week, early in the week, but still game week nonetheless for the Ohio State Buckeyes. So excited about that. Notre Dame going to be this Saturday night. I've got a whole host of things going on in regard to our 2002 National Championship reunion. So stuff on Friday night down at Land Grant. Got brunch on Saturday, tailgate on Saturday, culminating with the game immediately after that. So there's a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts. So pretty excited though, but it's going to be a busy weekend trying to figure out how to squeeze it all in and make sure we can get enough great content here for everybody as well. So try to get 2, maybe 3 episodes out here this week heading into the game. Talk a little bit about some of the things that went on in week 0. Also, look at, obviously upcoming the Notre Dame game with Ohio State. And then lastly, we'll sit here and dive in and answer some of your questions because I threw it out there on Twitter and I looked through the comments on this as well. So folks, please keep throwing in comments, keep throwing in questions because I try to get some of that stuff answered. And maybe during the season as we get going, maybe like a Monday recap, Monday, Tuesday recap, Wednesday, Thursday, do some sort of question and answer show, Friday, ultimately kind of taking everything back in to what is going to be going on with the weekend. All right, so this weekend going to be a big one and very excited. So that's kind of, I think, how we'll end up breaking down the show. I want to start off and look back just a little bit. Week 0, Illinois obviously gets a big win. It's nice to see Big Ten teams win games out of conference. It's only going to bolster the conference. And while, yes, Illinois just beat Wyoming, they did wax them pretty good, much to the chagrin of my good friend Austin Ward. Probably pretty sad about that, given that that's where he is from and that is his squad out there. And he didn't even have the decency to go to the game. But nice win for Brett Bielema, getting that program off to the right start. They did last year, beat Nebraska, and that will bring us to the next game that ultimately transpired. Nebraska taking on Northwestern across the pond in Dublin, Ireland. Nebraska at one point has a 28-17 lead. For some unknown reason, Scott Frost at that point elects to go for an onside kick, surprise him, really give him the dagger, but it's early in the third quarter. I don't know why. He had all the momentum. He had a double-digit lead. Ultimately, Northwestern recovers it, and then Pat Fitzgerald basically Jim Tressel Scott Frost to death, running the football, playing conservative, kicking field goals, punting, playing field position, and knowing that Nebraska, like they did so many times last year, losing all of their games by less than 9 points and just about all of them in a one-possession fashion by 8 or less, would eventually give it up. And they eventually gave up the lead and trailing 31-28. Casey Thompson, who looked really good in the first half, and I couldn't remember why Texas, ever would have wanted to part with him, came back to earth in the middle of the second half and throws an interception, ultimately costing the game. So Scott Frost, not off to a great start this year. And I mean, he's the odds-on favorite to be the first coach fired in the Big Ten and probably ultimately in the country. So one of the more blue-bloodish programs here in the Big Ten. They've been on life support for a while. And Scott Frost would ultimately, they said, have to win his next 50 consecutive games without a loss. And he still wouldn't have the record of Bo Pelini did when he was ultimately fired at Nebraska. So I think that goes to a little bit of where they are. Now, I want to get a little bit of some stuff with Notre Dame here. Before that, though, I had a question about the offensive line in this year. How will this year's offensive line be different than last year? So last year, you look at it, they had Whippler playing center, obviously when Harry Miller stepped away. You had Paris Johnson on the field at guard. You had Thayer Mumford on the field at guard. You had Dwan Jones at tackle as well. And then you had my friend, the lucky Frenchman out there, Pierre playing on the other tackle. So they had five offensive linemen, and really 4 of them were tackles. And so that helped you a little bit in pass pro, but I think it ultimately hurt the run game and their ability to move around and be able to pull and do some things. Because while the offensive tackles are great pass blockers and they can do some great things, they're a little bit taller and generally it's a little bit different skill set. There are certain guys that can do both and do both pretty well, but it's really, really difficult to be able to go out and execute at a high level, especially when your body type might not be there. So this year, they've kicked Paris Johnson outside. He's playing left tackle. Right tackle is going to be Dwan Jones. He's staying in the same spot. Whippler's in the same spot. But now you've got Donovan Jackson and Matt Jones most likely filling in there at guards. They've got a couple other guys that they can kind of roll through, but it's going to be about a 7 guys that you feel comfortable with ultimately getting on the field. And what this is going to do, when you saw Justin Fry come in, who I've been a huge fan of, he was out there at UCLA with Chip Kelly, as they'll start doing some more scheme running game. You're going to see some pulling. You're going to see some guys moving around, and he coaches with an intensity and a ferocity. And so there's been a lot more line surge this year. Now, you know what you're thinking, like last year, how could they not get yards against the defense? The defensive front wasn't great. Everybody could run on them. Well, they were able to do that, but just the way they go about it this year, not just as much pure zone. You're going to see, especially with the talent that they have at the tight end and fullback position, moving those guys around back and forth. And I think Cade Stover will be, a huge piece of that, is being able to block down, pull guys around and kick out in more scheme runs. You have zone runs, which is where everybody's zoning and blocking a guy, to their near inside or wide outside, out in wide near outside or wide outside. Or you've got more scheme runs. We have guys blocking down, creating angles, pulling around, and it's a little bit different feel. And so while some coaches love the scheme, some coaches love the zone, it goes back and forth about what the preference is for coaches. And, in your scheme run stuff, it gives you a little more variety. It gives you some more flexibility. It can be harder to time up, but if it's done correctly and you have the personality and personnel and bodies to do it, it can be more effective. So I think this year with the smaller guards, a little bit shorter, a little more athletic, being able to move laterally, it's going to give them that ability. And then also on some of those double teams to get up to the second level, because last season you could see that they would struggle a little bit moving to the second level on some of those double teams. So that'll be the difference this year with the offensive line versus what it was last year. Another quick question about, some playing time for some young guys. CJ Hicks, linebacker out of Dayton, Sonny Styles, linebacker out or safety out of Pickerington. If it is a tight game, the entirety of the game, I would not anticipate seeing these guys a ton. I think you'll see them out there on some special teams. They might be able to get a couple snaps out there, but you got to remember, Sonny Styles didn't come until camp. He's very talented, very physically gifted kid, but there is a steep learning curve to playing football at the college level, and especially high level football. This isn't a team that you're just, throwing away guys on defense, get them out there, if they stop somebody, great. This is a defense you heard Jim Knowles talk about, Steel Chambers talk about. Why not top 10? Why not top 5? Why not number 1? They have confidence in this defense. And so getting young guys out there, well, it's important. And you're going to see a lot of sophomores play. Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Tyleek Williams, you'll see out there. Mike Hall, you're going to see some young guys up front. You're going to see some younger guys in the back end too come up and play. You'll see some veteran pieces, but there's going to be a number of different things that are going on. And it's just tough when you have a defensive scheme that's a little more complicated like they have this year to get some of those young guys in there early in a game of this magnitude. Against Arkansas State, and we'll talk next week, I think you'll see a lot of these guys. But CJ Hicks came in the spring. I don't know if he's really cracked, that 3 to 4 man rotation you're going to have for those 2 linebacker positions. And this isn't a game where you would probably throw a third linebacker in there. And Sonny Styles just came in this fall. And while both of those guys have looked good, CJ Hicks has really settled in and looks productive, and he will get some reps this year and he will get on the field. And I believe Sonny Styles will as well. But Sonny's just came in and he looks the part and he's made some plays and you can see the flashes. It's a lot on his plate, to be able to play. And also let's remember, you have some pretty good safeties back there. You got Ronnie Hickman, you've got Court Williams, you've got Josh Proctor, they're rolling Cam Martinez, Lathan Ransom through, and Lathan Ransom is going to get on the field most likely before Sonny Styles. I can't sit here and promise you that, but Lathan Ransom has played well. He's a smart player, played early in his career, obviously had the injury last season, but he's a smart kid and a good player. And so they're going to try to get guys in. But Jim Knowles also, as you've heard him, he's talked about the fact that he doesn't want to roll, 5, 7, 8, 9 guys through the back end. Up front, get a lot of reps. I could even see him rolling some guys at linebacker. As we'll get into linebacker rotation a little bit and who's going to be in there. But up front, look for a lot of guys to roll. But this, I don't think, will be a situation where you're going to see a ton of guys rolling through the secondary on a regular basis. Remember last year we saw like the line changes back and forth. And I don't know if that's good to get in the flow of the game. It's great to kind of work guys in to make sure you keep people fresh. I don't know, though, if you want to be in a situation where you're having wholesale substitutions on a consistent basis, because I don't think that that's something that's ultimately great for defensive continuity. So CJ Hicks might see a little action in the second half. Sonny Styles could see some action in the second half, but neither one of those guys I would anticipate to be the first guys off the bench coming in subbing for the starters at those positions. They're good. This is a big game. It's a night game. It's important to start fast. There's going to be a ton of recruits. So we'll obviously have to chill out and kind of wait and see how that ultimately evolves as well. Talking about the linebacker rotation, what that looks like. Had a question throw up there. Outside of Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers, who will be in that rotation? Cody Simon played really well last year before he hurt his shoulder, was rolling in there and probably playing close to as well as Tommy before Tommy really exploded in the Rose Bowl. So you're going to see some Cody Simon. Smart guy, understands the game, moves well. You can see it. Tommy's a little further along right now because you got to remember Cody had some injury stuff, missed a lot of the spring. So Tommy's been able to develop himself as the leader of that defense and hold himself solid in there and looks good. Chip Trainum, the Akron kid who came back, I believe Hoban, went to Arizona State as running back, ultimately transferred back. He's been rolling in. Now he, I think, might be the emergency running back if you need a fourth guy back there. If Dallin, something happens with him and all of a sudden you're in a pinch, they might have to throw Chip back there. So I know he's probably gotten some reps at it. But I think that they like what Chip's been able to do on the defensive side of the ball. He's athletic. He moves well. He's pretty instinctive. And you could see he was settling in the spring, but now in the fall began to make some jumps. And he was learning the new defense just like everybody else. The only difference for Chip is he hadn't played defense in quite a while. And then the last guy I think you'll probably see, and it'll depend, maybe some spot action and situational packages, short yardage, goal line, getting a third linebacker on the field is I think you could see him see my man EA getting in there, Pale Giote, if I can pronounce his name, we just call him EA. And then also Taraja Mitchell. Those two guys, I think, in that third linebacker set, you could see them moving in if you get some short yardage, some goal line packages, or later in the season when you're facing the Iowas, the Wisconsins, the Michigans, teams that are going to line up and pound the ball. I know that they've got some three linebacker stuff that they can deploy if ultimately needed. But I think that that's something that's a little bit different with that rotation. But it's going to be Tommy and Steele and a heavy dose of those guys, probably with Cody and Chip maybe working in as well to kind of spell them. All right, so one of the other big questions that was out there was about the defense, obviously. And someone threw out the question, takeaways. Over under 1.5 takeaways for this Ohio State defense in the first game. Defense did a pretty good job, especially against a quarterback who's going to be in the Heisman Trophy conversation during training camp and potentially taking away the football. So 1.5, it's a big number because I think your goal is always to get 2 takeaways on defense. Do you always hit that? Probably not. I mean, I think if you hit it every time, you're hitting 25, 24, 25 to 30 turnovers in a season. You can get 2, possibly a little more. I'm going to hit the over on this. I don't know how much Notre Dame is going to throw, and I think Marcus Freeman will be very, very disciplined with how he obviously rolls out his fresh starter at quarterback. Buckner is going to be his first time out there starting, going to be in a big hostile environment. The issue will be if Ohio State starts fast, and this is one of the other questions in there about fast starts that someone asked me about, the trepidation from fans and just the general worry, because there is a hesitancy and anxiety. If you look back at Ohio State, going back to my loss with Texas in 2005, you've got USC, you've got Virginia Tech, you've got Oregon as of late. I mean, I know I'm missing some other ones in there. I mean, they had a Miami victory, but this team hasn't been great Oklahoma as well, and the non-conference games at home. They've won more of them on the road, but those big non-conference games at home haven't necessarily been fantastic showing. So a little bit of trepidation with that. So Ohio State starts fast. It'll get the crowd into it. Get some, maybe get a 3 and out to start the game, go down and score, touchdown. All of a sudden, everybody's juiced up, ready to go, especially if the offense in that second series starts looking really good. If that's the case, if that's how this thing plays out, I think the over of the 1.5 turnovers hits. I think you get 2 because you're going to be in a chase game at that point if you're Notre Dame. And Buckner at quarterback, you're going to have to throw. Now, will Marcus Freeman stay just really disciplined and understand that, you know what, he might be in a situation where the more you try to win, the worse your loss will actually look. Sometimes it's better to just understand that you're outmatched in a game, and we're just going to go out here, we're going to run the football, we're going to chew clock, we're going to make sure we punt it. And yeah, we realize that in doing this, we're probably not going to win, but we can't keep pace with Ohio State anyway. And so with that, we're going to just try to limit this and make sure that we're not getting absolutely blown out of the water. We're asking Buckner to throw it 45, 50 times. And next thing you know, he's throwing 3 picks and we're really up against it. We've given up 50 points. Notre Dame's got a pretty good defense, but the longer they're on the field, the worse it would ultimately be. So I would anticipate Marcus Freeman to stay disciplined with it. But if they do, if Ohio State can get a couple stops early on and get 14 points on the board, then you begin to put Notre Dame in a situation where they may have to chase. And I don't know if that's a situation with Buckner that they want to be in. And so they'll probably back off, but they're still going to have to push it some. I think Ohio State will be able to slow down their run game. And we'll get into that a little more, but I'm going to take the over for the 1.5 takeaways simply because I feel like this Ohio State offense will start quickly enough that it will ultimately put a lot of pressure on the Notre Dame offense to try to keep pace and try to score. When you have a pass rush like JT Tuimoloau, you're going to have Jack Sawyer, you have Zach Harrison out there, Tyleik Williams, Mike Hall, a host of other guys inside. There's a number of players, man, that are going to be able to get to the quarterback. Jim Knowles' defense likes to bring some heat, and they bring it in unique ways, dropping guys, rushing guys. They have a lot of unique blitz packages and a lot of unique personnel packages they can put on the field. And so with that, confuse a young quarterback, put them in a rough situation. And I think that over under 1.5, I think that will ultimately hit. So we've got that going there. Another question that came through, how to take away Mike Mayer, the very talented and possibly best player on the Notre Dame offense, at least probably their best weapon, projected first-round tight end. You know, he was the one, if you listen to the last episode, who had the comments coming in, hey, you know, it's playing a lot of loud stadiums. This won't be any different, yada, yada, yada. It wasn't disrespectful, but I think it's going to be a rallying cry for Buckeye Nation to kind of get them going. But how do you take away Mike Mayer? So when you have a tight end in the middle of the field, if you run 2 split safety looks a lot, you leave that middle of the field open. You're stronger on the perimeter with your corners rolled down, but you're going to leave the middle of the field open. And so Notre Dame, while they don't have great wideouts and they're banged up right there as well, I'm going to try to protect the middle of the field. How do I do that? I'm going to keep one safety in the middle of the field, call it single high safety. Instead of going to a 2 deep look where you open that middle of the field and you give Mike Mayer that room to bend and work in the middle on a linebacker or even a safety who's come down. That's not great. What you want to do is keep the middle of the field closed with a middle of the field safety. You can have a linebacker bracket him, safety, the other safety on the other side, or the star, the nickel, whatever it is you want to call it, now whatever personnel group they're in, and you can kind of bracket that guy, and you leave your corners on an island. And here's the good news. J.K. Johnson, Denzel Burke, Cam Brown, they've all been really good this training camp. I mean, they've put together some nice work. They've got about 4 corners that you're going to be able to play. And so with that, you feel good about that situation out there on the perimeter. They're tougher throws. I'm going to make people try to bang it in there and try to ultimately do that. And in doing so, you know what? We're going to condense the middle of the field. We're going to pack the middle of the field. And the good thing about Jim Knowles, like, he's not an all or nothing guy. It's not like, hey, we're blitz. They'll blitz. They'll play normal coverage, 7-man drop. Then they'll also maybe drop 8-man. They'll bring six guys in pressure, drop in only five. They do a lot of different things and from a lot of variety of angles. Now, there's a chance to screw some of that up, but you have to have great communication, which will be another key. And I'll get to that stuff in my keys to the game. And, as we move forward through the week, but ultimately that's how you slow down Mayer. And Jim Knowles knows that. He's faced talented interior players before. And to do that, you have to squeeze them. You have to box them in to make sure that you have guys over the top and underneath or side by side, however you're ultimately going to build those brackets and force them to beat you left-handed. And we'll see ultimately if Notre Dame's able to do that. So that's how you take away Mike Mayer. And I think that they will be able to do that. I'll throw this up here. We start talking about point spreads. Point spreads started off at 13.5. It's ballooned 17.5. So Marcus Freeman asked about the spread. 17.5 points. We'll use that in the team meeting today. It's good to know. Marcus is going to try to get his guys fired up with that. And I understand it. 17.5 points, it's a disrespectful spread for two teams that are top five, but that is what the betting public is pushing this at 13.5, 13, 12.5. I loved it. Ohio State by 2 touchdowns. I felt like that was good. You start pushing it over 17 now. Now it's 3 scores. You give the chance of a backdoor cover, and anything happens with the game getting tight. Now you're in a whole nother realm as far as betting. So Marcus sees that. Why is the spread pushed? Well, it started off at 13, 13.5, 12.5, wherever it was, but it was under 2 touchdowns, close to it. And now that it's over 3 scores, which is significant. Why did that happen? Well, I think that there's enough noise around this Ohio State team that people are slowly beginning to realize that maybe they could be as good as Bama, and that nationally there's someone that can challenge Bama. Notre Dame's beat up on the outside at receiver. Offensively, you don't feel like they have that firepower, that explosion. They've got some talent up front on both sides of the ball, and they have a chance to maybe get to CJ Stroud. And we'll get into some of these matchups later in the week. But, looking at that, I think people realize how good CJ is, what he's going to be able to do. You see the bevy of wide receivers. And then ultimately, Notre Dame, like I said, they don't have the firepower to keep pace. And this Ohio State defense, I think people are starting to think that it might be significantly better than it was last year. And so that's caused this to push. Notre Dame had a number of wide receiver injuries in camp. There was a lot of things they were battling, but ultimately with that now, they're in a different spot. They're in a better spot, and they're going to be I just look at it. I'm trying to find a pathway for them to maintain game control, and it's going to have to be by running the football. And I just think this Ohio State defense is too good up front. And the way Eichenberg and the way Chambers are playing, the way they're setting edges with those defensive ends, and the way the safeties can come down and get involved in the run game too. 17.5 points is a big number. I wouldn't feel great taking the over, but it wouldn't shock me if this game is more than 3 touchdowns for Ohio State. So that's kind of the last little piece of game nugget that we have right now. A couple of other quick things. Number one, someone was asking, I think AJ's gotten in this, my good buddy AJ Hawk on the Pat McAfee show. A lot of you watch that as well. I pop in there as well. A lot of you watch the podcast, with Austin Ward, Byrne, myself, got Zwick on there, Nicole. And so that's a lot of fun. And so you got a lot of stories and, crossover watching. Question came up. AJ has never been documented for a concussion. And they asked me, has AJ ever had a concussion? I think I'm almost 100% certain that AJ's had a concussion and probably had multiple concussions. Has he ever been documented? Do you ever see a doctor for it? Not a chance. AJ would wear his helmet super loose, would chew gum and not wear a mouthpiece, which is not advisable as well. His helmet would slide all around. And he would just smoke dudes with his head. And so, yeah, could come down, hit the bridge of his nose would get all busted up, as you can see. That's just how he played the game. And I was never documented with a concussion either. You just didn't go to talk to the doctors about that. That wasn't a thing back when we played, and it's starting to be better now, and that's important. And I respect the health, but there's no way AJ didn't have a concussion. He's just never been diagnosed and had a concussion documented. So that's where I think that delineation happens. It's one thing to not have them. It's another thing to have had them and then ultimately have not had them documented or anything like that. So that's a different piece altogether. And then lastly, we'll get to this. Jim Tressel, they brought this up. The question was asked about Jim Tressel showing up to the reunion. And should he show up? Would he show up with the way everything has happened, the way he kind of left, was treated? And you look at it now and it's laughable, talking about guys trading bowl gifts and rings for tattoos. And now we're in an era in NIL where guys are making 5-6 figures during the season with what they're able to do. And so it's crazy to where we've come. But those were the rules at the time, albeit, what was that, about 10, 12 years ago now. But those were the rules. So they got broken. And even if it was ridiculous with what happened, but I'll say this, Jim Tressel's a Buckeye through and through. He was back here when we had the 10-year reunion. And there was a little bit of resistance internally because people, I think, administratively weren't sure how he would be accepted in the horseshoe after everything that happened, because it was really close. It was just a couple of years removed. Remember, he left in 2010, was his last season, fired on Memorial Day in 2011. And then so it was just the end of 2012. So you're talking about a year and a half, not even, since his departure. Roaring applause, thunderous applause for Coach. And incredibly happy that he came to that. And all the players wanted him there, especially the seniors, because they knew what he ultimately did for us. And he's coming back. He was at the 10-year anniversary or 100-year anniversary of Ohio Stadium. And so he's coming to the 20-year reunion. He will be there. That's part of the reason it is this game and maybe not Michigan or something else. It's this because this was the one that worked best for him to make sure he could be here knowing it was a night game. And Tress would miss this for the world. He's a Buckeye. He loves his players more than anything else. And the things that he does for his guys, absolutely unbelievable. And so he will be there. And I know that he will get the applause and the reception that he deserves, rightfully deserves, I might add. So that's it for this edition of Carps Corner. Thank you for tuning in once again. Like, subscribe, keep throwing questions out. We'll do like a little mailbag each and every week, probably coming off the weekend, maybe midweek. So throw those out there. Keep recommending it. I appreciate all the support. We've grown the following in this huge. There might be some different things we might be doing here, moving around, but it's been absolutely tremendous. So thank you so much for that. So continue to help grow this, and look to see you soon.